important to understand these four ideas. And what we're going to try and do today is to wrap up these four ideas together. And from these four ideas, to begin to understand what the real power of the Yetzer Hara was. The first question was, what is the creation of the Yetzer Hara? When the Buddha created the Yetzer Hara, he created the Yetzer Hara as a resolution to a certain problem. And most of us think that we are all bothered by the Yetzer Hara all day. And we think that the Yetzer Hara is the great force which pervades our life. And if I say to you, where's my Yetzer Hara? Most people will say, well, I really can't identify it. Really. So we think that the power of creation was in the Yetzer Hara, in the desire to think for ourselves, to be selfish, or to do chatonim. Whereas the Yetzer Hara was a very, very small voice. What we must realize, and what we said last week in the first principle, is that the greatest thing, one of the greatest things that the Baruch Shem ever made was the Yetzer Hara. It literally was a extremely difficult thing to construct. Why? Again, we said that the whole purpose of creation was to replace a circumstance called Olam Haba, which is a situation of tremendous ecstasy that will go on for eternity. I will not go into the description of that. We did that last week and many, many times before. Do you have another chair? This is the creation itself, was for a place called Olam Haba. Olam Haba, meaning the future world, is a circumstance. It is a condition. It is a place where the neshama ostensibly goes to spend an eternity. What does it do there? It exists in a state of incredible joy and ecstasy. As I said before, I will not repeat what the nature of that state is. But essentially, we know that that state depends or is contingent upon the perception of God Himself. When God wants to create the greatest type of simcha or joy which is possible, He knew that the greatest whole is Him, is the perception of Himself. Since the Baruch Shem is existence per se, and since His unity is an absolute unity, and since the nature of beauty is nothing more than the perception of unity, the Baruch Shem knew that the perception of God Himself is the perception of perfect beauty, and it is the medium which can induce the greatest amount of simcha and joy. Again, I can only say these statements very shortly because the length and breadth of those statements we've discussed before. The problem was in the neshama that the neshama was a type of being which could not sustain that state without in some way earning it or contributing to it. We have called that problem Nam L'Ksufa. The neshama cannot accept what the Baruch Shem has to give it without in some way contributing to that great goodness. But what is that goodness? That is the perception of God's unity or God's awesome power over being. So as the Baruch Shem said to the neshama, I will give you a choice. I will let you choose and I will let you develop that which I want to give you. I will not give you gratis for free, but I will make you work for it. What will I make you work for? I will make you work to perceive who I am. You will have to do something to gain that insight. So the neshama understood and said, fine, I'm willing to do this because there's no other way to abide in the simcha of your Olam Haba except that in some way I want to participate in that creation. So the next problem that we said last time was the Baruch Shem now had to create an alternative to Him. In other words, when He said, I will give you a choice and you will have to work and choose to see me, to know me, what the Baruch Shem was saying is that I will have to create another alternative because there is no choice unless there are two different directions. So the Baruch Shem therefore created that choice. But in creating that choice, He had to create an option to Himself. And what we said is, how do you create an option to yourself? How does God create an option to God? Since God, the Baruch Shem, is all that there is, and there could be nothing else, there could be no pleasure, there could be no beauty, there could be no understanding without the existence of God, how is it possible to create another alternative to that existence so that the neshama would then have a choice between God and this other thing called other gods. Did the Rebbeinu create another God? So we said, no, that's impossible. So how do you create an alternative to divinity? The answer was what? We said that the neshama itself is the alternative to divinity. Why is that? Because what we said was that the neshama has a quality of self-awareness. It knows that it is. That quality of self-awareness is a reflection of the divine. Who is God? God is an absolute power, an absolute presence, because He is the process of existence itself. But does God know that He is? Does God know that He is this type of being? Of course He does. God has an awareness of Himself. He can experience Himself. Except that His experience of Himself and Himself are the same thing. Again, I will not go into that. That requires a great deal of premises and prerequisites to understand that. What the Rebbeinu did was create another type of object, and He took this object in the neshama and gave it self-awareness. That's an extraordinary creation. He gave another thing the ability to know itself as separate from the Creator or from God Himself. This ability of being a self, of being oneself and aware of oneself, is a quality of independence. It is a shadow or reflection of the divine itself. Hence, the neshama, in its ability to know itself as separate from all other reality, is an aspect of the divine. This was the resolution that the problems that God had in front of Him. I have to create another God, so to speak. I have to create another alternative. I need something which has a divine quality, but I haven't. You are that divine quality. I will make you the alternative to me. So essentially, what is He saying? The following: you must choose. You must choose between me, real divinity, or you must choose between yourself. In other words, I will create the possibility where you can think that even though you are a reflection of the divine, I will give you the possibility of an illusion that you will think that you actually are divine. So we said that essentially the choice rests between what's called apparent divinity versus real divinity. I am the real God. Mine is the real power, and I'm really divine. But I will give you the alternative, and I will allow you to choose another option of another divine being. But there is no divine being but me. Hence, it will only be the option of an apparent divinity. What is that option? You. Since you already are a reflection of the divine, I will make that quality in you capable of an illusion, so that you can convince yourself that you are a divine being as well. That's the essence of the choice that God made. It is what's called a yichud choice. It is a choice of the divine, where God says, choose the real divine, either me or yourself. And if you choose me, if you choose to connect yourself with me, to become involved in me intimately, that exactly is what your reward will be. Because what is Olam Haba? Olam Haba is nothing than the perception of the divine. What divine? The real divinity. The perception of God Himself. So the Rebbeinu says, I will give you that exact choice. And you will choose between me and between yourself. And that choice will tell you whether or not you will be capable of the perception of the real divine later on. To the extent that you allow the real divine to enter your life, to the extent that you attach yourself to me, to that extent you will be allowed to see me at a time when there will be no inhibition, when there will be no barriers between me and you. But should you choose yourself, should you choose to make yourself the divine, should you deny me and reject me, and choose to put yourself in my place, then that's exactly the divine perception which you will have in the future. You will have the perception of your own divinity. But what is that perception? That's the perception of absolutely nothing, because you have no divinity. Yeah.
Is that why? Does that get into the whole translation, direct translation of Olam Haba, the world that was? Because if we see Hashem, what we had is what He's giving us?
In a sense, yes. Yes, in a sense that's correct. Not totally, but it's in that direction, yes. Yes. That's the first concept we spoke about last week. The yichud choice, the divinity choice between God, real divinity, and the neshama itself, apparent divinity. Okay, what was the second thing that the Rebbeinu did? having established the essential criteria or the structure of the choice or the ethics, what the Buddhism did was simply create an environment or a situation where you could no longer see real divinity in its real nature. What did the Buddhism do? The Buddhism hid. He hid from existence. How does God hide from existence when He is the very process of existence itself? He creates another type of substance in which that substance cannot be visible to divinity. He created what we call the physical universe, or what we refer to as Olam Hazeh, this world. This world is a world of the physical universe. What's the essential feature of the physical universe? The essential quality of the physical universe is that we can only perceive that which is through our five senses. We do not know that which is beyond the five senses. We know that which we can sense, and sensation is restricted to the five senses. Does the five senses tell you about God? No, not at all. Can you see God? Can you hear God? No. Therefore, you cannot come into direct experience of God's existence. Because of that, we now have a perfect environment. We have a world, our world the way it is now, and the entire physical universe, which God hides from. He hides in the sense that He is not visible through sense experience anymore. Why does God do that? Because if God did not withdraw, it would be impossible for the neshama to choose other than God. The power of God is so enormous and so absolute, there cannot be an alternative. The only an alternative is possible, even in an illusory sense, only when God withdraws. That makes it possible. So God withdrew. He withdrew and He created a new type of circumstance called Olam Hazeh, called this world. Now in this world, it is now possible for the person to make that mistake. What does the Buddhism then do? He takes the neshama and he puts it into a body. A body is a physical entity, and the neshama is a spiritual entity. He takes the neshama and he puts it into a body. So now the person who is a combination of both can no longer come into contact with God directly. That now is his choice. What do we see to now? What we see to now is the following. We now understand what the structure of the choice is, number one, and we understand the key prerequisites for that structure to exist. Which is what? That in order for that choice to exist, God must withdraw. He must hide, so to speak. That doesn't mean He actually withdraws. God hasn't withdrawn anywhere. But what it means is that as far as we see, He's withdrawn. You see, there is a mask or a barrier between Him and between us. It's like opaque glass. He is no longer visible. But it's not that the light has gone less or that He's diminished His light. Of course not. But does the condition of Olam Hazeh, does the condition of a physical universe allow God to achieve this choosing process? No, not yet. Why not? Because, very simply, for the neshama to want to choose, to want to go somewhere, it has to feel a need. It has to feel a lack, doesn't it? Why does the person with the neshama in him want to choose himself over God? That's absurd. It is true. The person can no longer see God in a real sense, in the sense of experiencing God. You see, not that God is a sight, but the person can no longer experience Him directly. That may be true. But why would a person suddenly think that just because he can't experience God, that he becomes an alternative to God? What kind of logic would produce that kind of a conclusion? None. So obviously, we see therefore that it's not enough. There is more to the scenario than meets the eye. And what we have to understand is the rest of the scenario. That in order for God to achieve, for the Buddhism to achieve the objective of Bechira meaning free choice, so that the person can work for his Olam Haba, the Buddhism had to do something far beyond that. What did he do that was beyond that? Okay, we come to the second concept, the diminution of the neshama. What did the Buddhism do? The Buddhism created the neshama, and as we said, the neshama is a being composed of a certain substance. That substance is called ruchnius, or spirit. It is not knowable through the five senses. And what did the Buddhism do to that neshama? He said something very important. He said to that neshama, Lechi ma'atis atzmacha. What the Buddhism said was, diminish yourself. It's a staggering thing. Where the Buddha said to the neshama, I want you to lessen yourself. I want your structure to be halves, or quarters, or thirds. I want your structure. I want the amount of light. I want the amount of spiritual existence which you possess to become much less. I want to diminish you from that which you once was to a fraction of that which you were. Why? Why would the Buddha do that to the neshama? The Buddha did that to the neshama before he put it into a body. Before God took that neshama and put it into a body to become a human being, the Buddha said, I command you to diminish yourself. I will take away an enormous amount of the power of your existence so that you are no longer in contact with it. Why did God do that? Because by doing that, the neshama now would feel empty or impoverished. Why does the Buddha want an impoverished neshama? Because it is an impoverished neshama which now has a need. Now that the neshama no longer feels the full extent of its existence, now that it feels a void or a deep pit inside it, it has a need. And that need yields a drive. Now the neshama wants more than anything else to replenish that void, to remove the void and replenish that which was taken away from it. So the function of the diminution of the neshama was to create a need to produce a drive, so that the neshama now would have a powerful drive to reattain its former stature. The former stature, when it didn't have a drive, it didn't have a need, it felt full, it felt complete, it felt fulfilled, we have called the word shlemus. The word shlemus means full, whole, complete. The neshama in its pristine state, the neshama in a state when it is complete, when it is full, is said to be in a state of shlemus. The word shalom, peace, comes from the same root. When the Buddha said diminish yourself, put a void into yourself, the neshama was said to be in a state of chason. Chason means inadequacy, insufficiency. It was in a state of chason. So what the Buddha did was, he converted the neshama from a state of perfection or a state of shlemus to a state of chason, of where it lacked a great deal of what it had formerly. In this new state, it is in a state of deprivation. It wants now to re-achieve what it once had. The neshama now wants to go from chason back to shlemus. That's what it wants. Why does God do that? Why does God take away from the neshama that which it once had, so that it will feel the lack, and then crawl back up to where it once was, work back up to where it once was? Why does the Buddha do that? Very simply. Because when the Buddha first created the neshama, it was in a state of what? Shlemus. It was in a state of shlemus. Well, what's wrong with that? In a state of shlemus, the neshama can go onto Olam Haba, and it could experience the perception of God as it is. What's the problem? We have said that in that state the neshama has a very severe problem. That problem is called Nama Sutra. The neshama is able to perceive the unity of God, but it doesn't want to perceive it. Because even though, what I mean it doesn't want to, it will perceive it, but it will be awkward or uncomfortable in the perceptual process. The neshama wants to partake of this perception. It wants to partake of this poem. Except in the process it will feel uncomfortable. Why? Because the neshama cannot participate in a process in which it did not contribute. It can't sit there and receive charity. That is against the nature of the neshama because of the divine quality which rests in the neshama. As God is a creator, so the neshama yearns to be a creator. It needs to want to create that which it will participate in. Hence, in the start, the neshama in its previous state of shlemus could not benefit from the toll that God wanted to give it. So what does the Buddha do? The Buddha says, I will take away that shlemus, and I will put you in a state of chason. You see, I will take away so that you will have to work back to what you were. But wait, once it works back to the second position of shlemus, right, which is shlemus number 2, right, not shlemus number 1. First it goes from shlemus to chason, and then it has to work its way back to get back to shlemus. So you will say, what's the difference between this shlemus and that shlemus? It's a circle word. No. Because what is the difference between this shlemus and that shlemus? Very simple. That shlemus was given to the neshama by virtue of its creation. This shlemus will be given to the neshama by virtue of its efforts, by virtue of it accomplished. Why does God want to give the neshama shlemus by virtue of what it accomplished? Because He wants to remove the problem of nam super. That is the essence of the matter. And this is the specific structure of why we see everything that we see. Let's go on. As we said before, the critical feature of the shlemus was the perception of God's unity. What the Buddhism does is make it mukhusa. He diminishes it. Hence, its ability to perceive God's unity is significantly diminished. He wants the neshama to go back to the state where it can perceive the Buddhism's unity on its own with full power. But he wants to do it by its own efforts. So what does he do? He therefore says to the neshama, I want to create an alternative to my unity or my divinity. And I want you to work for it. So the Buddhism creates the choice between two types of divinity. And that's the thing. If the neshama is able to go back to its state of shlemus, by connecting itself to God, by attaching itself to the Buddhism, it will then acquire the ability, the true ability of shlemus, to perceive God in Olam Haba. If, however, the neshama, connects itself to a false divinity, to itself, it will not go back to the shlemus. It will not have the shlemus of Olam Haba. It will be left empty, holding the bag. Do we understand how the structure now is incorporated in the choice itself? Do we understand how the diminution of the neshama is the essential thing which puts the neshama in a state where it's now capable of work, it's capable of need, it's capable of drive, it's capable of forging ahead, except that the Buddhism puts two directions in which to forge ahead. And on the basis of how it forges ahead, on the basis of the specific objective that it attempts to achieve, that will be what it will achieve in Olam Haba. There was a third concept that we said last week, which is very important to remember. What is that concept? The concept of being and value. You will see how important this is in a minute. What we said last week was the following. When the neshama is in its full state, it's in the state of being, in the state of shlemus. What does it think of itself? It's aware that it's in such a state. But what is its true feeling of itself? It feels a tremendous amount of value. It has a certain self-evaluation or self-assessment. It likes itself because of what it is. The essential concept of self-esteem or self-evaluation comes from the very act of being itself. When something is created, and that being which is created is enormous in terms of its power and enormous in terms of its origin, it senses its own being through its own esteem. Its esteem emerges from what it is. Hence we see the whole concept of what I think of myself is a direct consequence of what I am. If I am a great being, if I am a being with enormous power, with enormous kedusha and holiness, I will have an enormous sense of that value. When the Buddhism took that neshama and he lowered it and he diminished it, he not only diminished the being of the neshama, but what does the neshama now think of itself? What is it going to think of itself? The neshama in the state of shlemus, in the state of perfection, has a certain sense of itself. It has a certain sense of its own value. But if I take the neshama and I reduce it into a level of chasson, I have not only reduced its being, I have also reduced its own sense of self. The neshama now feels a hole inside. Why? Because it feels an enormous drop in what it thinks about itself. As if there's something wrong. It feels like off kilter, in a state of unbalance. It feels it does not possess an aspect of equilibrium. It now has a drive to achieve that equilibrium, a homeostatic drive. But essentially that homeostatic drive relates to its being and to its perception of self. Do we all understand that? It's very important to understand the relationship of being to value. As I said last time, where do we see value from being? What you have to understand is that the perception of beauty is in essence the perception of value. When we see a magnificent landscape, we see an artistic creation, when we hear a beautiful sound, a beautiful music, when we taste something incredible, any type of perception of beauty in which we are capable of, even when we see a beautiful suit of clothes, or whatever the story is, if you go to the department and you say, hey, I like that suit, or I like that outfit, or whatever the story is, what you're perceiving is what? You're perceiving the way different types of components come together in a perfect blend. What you perceive in beauty as harmony is integration. When you perceive all these things, you don't realize that you're perceiving and feeling value. You're saying, this looks beautiful. It's just put together so well. It feels good. It feels important. It feels like something really valuable. So what we understand is the following, that the perception of beauty is really the perception of value. And that beauty itself is based on the perception of unity. But value is a critical criteria in which a person knows beauty when he sees it. That's what he feels about beauty. He feels that it's important. And like they say in Hebrew, it is chashuv. Finally, we went down to the fourth concept, which is a critical concept. And what? The concept of illusory shlemus. We are finally now in the position to understand what the Yetzer Hara does, not why it does it, or how it's able to do it. Again, with the information we have now, we can understand what the Yetzer Hara does. We do not yet understand how it does it. What does the Yetzer Hara do? Very simple. The Yetzer Hara goes over to the person who has this feeling of void in him, and he's able to convince him that there is no void. The Yetzer Hara is a being that can go over to a neshama who is b'chason, who is lacking, who is deficient, and convince him that he is in a state of absolute shlemus. Therein lies his power. What the mechanism is, how he achieves that is something else. We will get into that in a minute. But that's what he does. Now you may say, if he does that, what are the immediate consequences? The consequence is catastrophic for the neshama. Why? Because if the Yetzer Hara can go into you and convince you that you are already b'shlemus, even though you are really in a state of chason, what will be the result? You will not work for shlemus anymore. You will be satisfied where you are. You will sit down and say, I am already at the destination in which I'm trying to get to. I am already at that destination, so why move? Why go anywhere? But that's the whole thing. After 120 years, when you have to come to the Bez Shemala, when you have to face what you've done, you suddenly will realize that you were all the time in the state of chason. You never went anywhere. The Yetzer Hara, in creating the illusion of shlemus in you, is able to disturb the forward movement. He's able to convince you not to move ahead. Hence what he does, he's able to keep you in a state of chason until the end. So when the time comes around when you have to answer for what you've done, you will be exactly in the same state when you were when you began. You will not be ready for Olam Haba. You will not have the power of Olam Haba at all. That's exactly what the Yetzer Hara wants to do. Evil thing that he is. Yes.
So why is it so much that the Yetzer Hara drives you to money, or drives you to power, or drives you to honor?
Because essentially what he wants to do, he wants to convince you, he wants to convince you that you are already b'shlemus. He doesn't want you to build anything up. He wants you to remain the same naked neshama that you are when you first arrived. Why? Because if he does that, that will prevent you from getting the shlemus. Now why does he want to do that? Why does he want to prevent you from getting shlemus? Why is he so evil? Because the answer is he's not evil. He wants you to gain that. He wants you to be in that illusory state. Why? Why do we think that? Emil, why do you think he wants to do this? What is he, so malicious? Who can give me an answer?
To really have to see the power of work.
Yes. Exactly. He is not there to trip you up, really. He doesn't want to see you in doom. But what he wants to do is he wants to create the alternative. He wants to create an option to true shlemus. But how do you create an option to true shlemus? The answer is you cannot. You can't create an option to true shlemus because either you are shalom or you are mechutza, one or the other. You can't create another type of shlemus, another type of perfection. That's impossible. But what you can do is you can create the illusion of shlemus. You see, what you can do is you can go over to someone and you can say to him, don't worry about it. Everything is fine. Sit and relax. You have arrived. Well, once you believe that, you won't work. If you won't work, you're not going anywhere. Why does the Sultan want to do that? Because that's his job. His job is to do that. Who is the Sultan's boss? The Rebbeinu himself. He created something. He said, this is your job, and this is what I want you to do. Your entire job is to make sure that nobody gets anywhere. Why? Because when they do get anywhere, they will have done so because they have defied you, and they refuse to acknowledge what you said, and they will say, no, I realize that I have to be close to the Buddha himself, that this feeling of false flament is false, it's an illusion. The Buddha wants us to remove that false feeling, to remove that illusion. He wants us to see through that illusion. And by seeing through that illusion, and by wanting to see through that illusion, the Buddha then says, now you will have worked for that shlemus because you will have deserved it, not because I will have given it to you. So, are there any questions? Yes.
I don't want to try to use confidence for sure.
You won't be able to, but you can ask the question.
The factors that allow, if someone wants to have an active participation within the acceptance and recognition of Hashem, that's the only thing that will really give it true flavor and true knowledge.
Right.
This occurrence happened actually on this throne under Marisha. That was the crate. Not a crate. Crate is the wrong word. The consequence of him wanting to be actively involved in creation is what led him to eat. That's what I'm saying, the new topic. Eating of the tree, and therefore putting him in a position where now he was not dependent on Hashem anymore, but he was given the choice to be actually involved. So then it wasn't something that was only decided up in the heavenly realm. It was something that man himself choose in a physical form here on earth.
I'm going to answer your question. Okay, by the end of tonight. But let's put that question aside. Okay. We now understand what the objective of the Satan is. Look at that one more. Yes.
That you didn't really directly answer your question, which is that so many, here you're saying that the Sahara gives you a sense that you have no need for a drive, and the way I see the Sahara is that you have a drive, but it's misguided and misdirected.
Well, okay. We'll elaborate on that. Okay. It's correct what you're saying. I didn't want to say it that way yet. Okay. Let's go on. We now understand the objective of the Yetzirah. We understand that it is a function of the Yetzirah to attempt to create an alternative to God. How? By attempting to convince you that you are already the shlemus. And God gave that job because the Buddha wants you to recognize two different types of shlemus. He wants you to recognize real shlemus, and he wants you to recognize false shlemus. It is the job of the Yetzirah to show you the picture of false shlemus, you see, and try to confuse you in terms of which objective you're going to obtain. Now, the question remains, how does the Yetzirah do that? How does he give you a feeling? How does he allow you to feel an illusory form of strength? The question here is the following. We now understand what the Yetzirah wants to do. What we want to understand is how does the Yetzirah do it? And the answer really is very simple. What the Yetzirah really does is simply invert the equation. What equation? We have said before the following, and this is very important again to realize. A being which exists in a certain way knows its existence through its own sense of itself. That sense of itself is a certain statement about its own value. Is an aspect of a certain sense of self-esteem or self-evaluation. The neshama doesn't see its being. It doesn't actually see its substance as such. It experiences substance through its awareness by its own sense of its value. How does the neshama know that it's the shlemus? Because there's a value of shlemus. When God makes the neshama into a state of chazon, how does the neshama now know that it's mechutza? How does it know that? Because it feels the value of a being who is mechutza. It feels a void. It feels inferior. It feels that there's something wrong with it. How? Does it see something wrong with it? Does it see suddenly that it's diminished? No. It feels diminished. Because since the Buddha has diminished its being, it automatically senses it through its diminished experience of itself. Do you see that? So hence, when the Buddhism toyed with its being, when the Buddhism went from Shlemus being to Cheson being, he automatically affected Shlemus value to Cheson value. That is the relationship between these two. Because of that, the Yetzer now can function. Because what he does is manipulate the value of a person. In other words, if he can come over and give you a certain sense of high self-esteem or high self-evaluation, what will you think? You will automatically feel as if you are high being. It's reversed as well. If I change your being, and by changing your being, I change your sense of self, then I can reverse it. By changing your sense of self, I can fool you in terms of what your being really is. You see how that goes? If I can make you think, if I can make you feel about yourself as if you are very, very important and very, very superior and very, very high, then what that will do is that automatically you will think that your being is of that type of nature. That is the power of the Satan. In other words, the Satan cannot give you being. Why? Because the Buddhism took away that which was yours. He diminished your being. The Satan cannot go over and give you being because he doesn't have the power of God. He doesn't have the power of creation. But when he does have the power, he has the power to manipulate value. He has the power to manipulate your head and the way you feel about yourself. And by manipulating your head and the way you feel about yourself, you will automatically think that you have changed in being also. That's how he's able to fool you. He reverses the equation. By manipulating value or your sense of own valuation, he can make you think that you have a much greater being than you are. By giving you the feelings of somebody who is B'Shlemus. Even though you are B'Cheson, he can make you think that you are B'Shlemus. It's a mirage. You see how that works? Interesting. Very subtle. It's so subtle that you don't even realize it. Now, how does he do that? Lemaisa, in detail. And I will show you how he does that. There are at least 4 different ways that he does that. Okay? Call them the 3 P's and let's say 1 R. Okay? Whether you know or not, these are the 4 biggest Yetzer Haras. Every Yetzer Hara that you will have is in one way or another essentially subsumed under one of these categories. Pleasure, power, performance, recognition. The basic objective of all these 4 different classes is to give you a new feeling about yourself. And if you have a new feeling about yourself, you will think of yourself in different terms. Let's take them one at a time. Pleasure. When the Buddhism created this world, when he created the body, he allowed the body to experience certain types of pleasure, certain types of physical pleasure. I don't have to recount what the physical pleasures are. We all know them very well. What exactly is a physical pleasure? What you don't realize is the following, and I said this before. Every physical pleasure has the exact same kedusha as a spiritual pleasure. In other words, all pleasure is based on the perception of the unity of God, or rather the perception of unity itself that emanates from God. That pleasure, or that unity, is in 2 forms. When you can perceive the unity of God directly, you experience it as spiritual pleasure. In that way, it is extreme ecstasy. But what the Buddhism has done was he's taken the quality of the unity of existence and he's put it in a physical form. So that even though you're experiencing unity, you're experiencing it in a way which is hidden from its source. So you can think that that unity, in a sense, does not belong to God anymore. It belongs to you. As I said before, the pleasure in taste, eating, in all sensations, the pleasure in all these things, in sight, in sound music, is the unity of the tones, in sight, the unity of the shapes and forms and the colors, in taste, the unity of the ingredients, the qualities therein, and even in all expressions of physical pleasure. There is always involved an aspect of unity, except that when the body senses that unity, it's a unity which is divorced from its source. The Buddhism gave you the capacity to appreciate God without seeing God and being able to deny God. What he has done was, he has separated the fragrance from the perfume, so that when you smell the fragrance, you do not realize that it comes from perfume anymore. You think it's attached to yourself. It emanates from your own body. Again, what the Buddhism has created was a source of pleasure, but a source of pleasure which is divorced from its source. But the mechanism of pleasure is the same for all. All pleasure must come from God. All pleasure is based in some way in relating to God, in relating to His Kedusha. There is no other form or possibility of pleasure. It cannot exist any other way. But what the Buddhism has done is done two things. He has created one type of pleasure where as you experience that unity, you can also relate to the source of that unity. That is the perception of spiritual unity. He has also created another type of unity, which is his own unity, where when you experience it, you don't know anymore that it comes from God. You think it comes from yourself. And that is the source of all physical pleasure. You can go through all the physical pleasure in the world, and you don't know that that which you are seeing is Kedusha itself. But Kedusha, which is separated from the Buddhism. Hence, when you see it, it gives you a sense of your own unity. It gives you a sense of yourself. Every type that you experience is an assertion of the self. Whenever you experience pleasure, examine your mind as it's experiencing that pleasure, and you will notice that in the moment of that experience, there's an assertion, there's a reinforcement, there's an emphasis of the self and of the importance of the self at the time of the pleasure. You think of the Buddhism? Of course not. You only think of the self as it's experiencing the pleasure. But as it experiences the pleasure, you experience the value and the importance of self. I am having pleasure. It is my pleasure. You see, it is my sensation. It is my body which is sensing it. As if you control the pleasure. As if it was really you. This is a case of value. What the Creator was able to do through your body. He needs to give you a sense of value, of importance of yourself. That's what He wants to do. How does He do it? He does it by attempting to give you a level of unity which you can no longer perceive its source. He allows you to feel Kedusha, and with that Kedusha, to create an illusion of value. Why does He want you to do that? Because in the midst of pleasure, do you feel empty? Do you feel like you need something? No, you feel great. You feel like you've arrived. This is exactly what you've been after. At the moment of these pleasures, this is the fulfillment of your being. But that is deployed. That's the illusion. There's no fulfillment of anything. Because in truth, you're still empty. How can you be empty and feel fulfilled? That is the power of pleasure. It makes you feel like you're complete. Yet you could be in a total state of emptiness. Power. What does power do? Well, there are many people who are after power. Not everyone has that Yetzirah. But we all know, whether we know it or not, in some aspect of our life, we are in all some way involved in power. Control. The ability to control another person in whatever relationship we have. Some aspect, either between husband and wife, between parent and child, between children, between adults, between boss and employee, whatever the story is, there's always a certain aspect of power. I'm able to tell that person what I want him to do, and he has to do it. What's the feeling of power? What's the pleasure of power? When you feel that pleasure, does that make you fulfilled? Yes. Does power have the ability to make you feel important? Of course. Why do you think people are so much after power? It's like kissing the word said. The ultimate aphrodisiac is power itself. It is the greatest pleasure. And those who run after it all the time know exactly what I'm talking about. Control, in whatever level you want, is an aspect of self-fulfillment. The feeling that comes from that self-fulfillment is an aspect of value. That is exactly what the Creator wants you to feel. He wants you to feel that you have some aspect of control. And by having some aspect of control, you have a shlita. Therefore, you have a what? You have an aspect of the divine. Because what is God but power? What is God but control? So I can convince you that you also have power and control in whatever aspect of life you have. You will have the sense of value and fulfillment which comes from that. But is it real? No, it's empty. Because the neshama still has a voice. The neshama is not turned on. The neshama does not grow in being. It does not go from chasson to shlemus by virtue of power. It does not go from chasson to shlemus by virtue of pleasure. Pleasure and power have the ability to make you feel good. But that's all. It doesn't have the ability to make you be good. It doesn't have the ability to create real being. It only has the ability to make you think that you're suddenly real being. Performance. Achievement. When you have accomplished something, when you have built something, when you have done something, when you feel that you have achieved an important objective, what does that make you feel like? Does that make you feel important? Definitely. You feel good about yourself. I did that. I accomplished that. You see, that was through my efforts. You see, my efforts and my efforts alone. I built that business. I became a millionaire. I achieved that. I got that raise. I did that job. I cured that person. Whatever you want to say, whatever you want to do. The illusion of achievement is that it gives you a certain self-fulfillment that you were responsible. You had the power. But it's not the power over people, it's the power over reality. Achievement is nothing more than the establishment of the power of reality, as if you could control reality, as if it lay in your hands what to and what not to do. As if you can say, I will succeed or I will fail. It's up to me. It's up to how much work I do. And that's absolutely false, because success and failure has not in your hands whatsoever. But you can feel like that, and that's what the Yetzer wants. He wants you to feel powerful. He wants you to feel that the achievement gives you that. That's what all science and technology is about. Why is this world swimming in atheism? Why is this world swimming in such arrogance that men think now that they can conquer all worlds? Because they have the achievement of technology. It's an illusion. So man now thinks that he can vie with God. Man thinks that he can replace God. He substitutes for God. There is no limit to his power. There's no limit to his achievement. Where did he get that? Where did he get that feeling from? How does he translate performance or achievement into the sense of power or fulfillment? That is the Yetzer. What you must understand is that the Yetzer himself cannot do any of these things. The Yetzer cannot give pleasure. It's not in his power. The Yetzer cannot make you a power over other people. The Yetzer cannot help you achieve something. It's only God that can do this. But what the Yetzer can do is make you feel as if you are the one who is responsible for all these things. He can make you feel that you are the value. You have the control. And that the divinity is yours about all these things. He's able to go from the equation of value to being. So that once you feel self-fulfilled, you don't feel like anything else is necessary. Because you have arrived. Recognition. When everyone looks up to you, when you're recognized, when you're approved, when you're applauded, do you get a sense of self-esteem? Is there a sense of self-fulfillment? Of course. Of course there is. But does that mean you're really something? Of course not. Just because a whole bunch of people suddenly recognize you, that doesn't mean anything. How many Rishonim and how many evil people can move masses of people? How many people who are nobodies, absolute nothing, sit there and being deified? For example, you have people who are some rock singers who run around like absolute idiots on the stage, banging guitars up and down in the most weirdest costumes and so on. And what do you look outside? What do you see? You see thousands of people, screaming teenagers, screaming adults. And what? As if this man was God himself on the stage. How? What about this person has a divine being? What was he able to do to be able to stimulate so many people? Is he God? Well, these people are jumping up and down as if he was God. How was he able to do that? That is the power of what? A recognition. You see, he definitely feels himself like God up on that stage because he has the power of so many people. All these people have gotten together and said, you are it. You are the most important thing that there is. Again, listen to the essence of the matter and listen what the Yetzer is. Pleasure, power, performance and recognition. All these four aspects cannot be produced by the Yetzer. You can never achieve, you will never be able to obtain any pleasure in your body if the kedusha of the Bonishim was not there. You will never be able to achieve power if the koyach of the Bonishim was not there. You cannot achieve or perform anything if God's will and power is not there. You will receive no recognition whatsoever if God hasn't decided to put you in that spot. So therefore, all of these things come from the kedusha and from the koyach of God Himself. What does this have to do with the Yetzer Hara? The answer is nothing, except that the Yetzer Hara is able to take all these things and hide God from it. He's able to convince you that you can have a value and you can have a what? You can have a self-esteem that's not based on its true source, but it's something which accrues to you alone because you are responsible. He's able to take these things and use them to give you a sense of importance and value, a sense of fulfillment which you've never had before. Why does He want to do that? Because by creating a sense of value, you will be fooled. You will think that you also have a sense of being. And He wants you to think that you have a self-being. Why? Because if you think that you have a being already from these four values, you will not work. It is an alternative to God Himself. That's the koyach of the Yetzer Hara, and that's how He functions. That's how He's able to convince you to do that which is other than God. What is the option and what is the alternative? The Yetzer Hara sounds like an enormously powerful being, doesn't it? How do you overcome? We see ourselves constantly entrapped by these various different aspects. We see these things and we think that in some way we have some measure of control. It's true, when we have pleasure, we think that that pleasure comes from our body. That in some way it is ourselves which have experienced the pleasure and therefore it is ours. We think power, we think performance, we think that when we own something, it makes me feel important. If I have a great suit of clothes, or if I have a beautiful house, or a beautiful car, suddenly I think that I am important, and I am very critical. We all know that, because we're all running after material goods. Why? Because material goods have an enormous power. The ownership of material goods have an enormous power to create a sense of value in it. But does that mean that you're a really important person? No, you can be an absolute jerk and be a multi-millionaire. One has nothing to do with the other. But wait, go over to the multi-millionaire jerk and he'll never believe you. He'll say, wait a minute, if I'm a multi-millionaire, I must be somebody. So we all look at that and we see that illusion and we say, yes, that's where it is. Let's all become multi-millionaires. But that's the illusion, you see. Why? Because we think that value is associated with these things. And since we see that value is associated with these things, we think that being is associated with those things. But that's the mistake. There is value associated with those things, but there is no being associated with those things. So what's wrong with value without being? Value without being is zero. It's nothing. It is an illusion. That's what's wrong with it. What is the alternative? The alternative is a whole different thing. How are we able to combat these four things? How? The answer is through the seichel, through the mind. Because the Bonishim put in this in the Shema. We have us in the Yetzer Hara. And you know what the Yetzer Hara says? The Yetzer Hara says, wait. Wait, there's something called truth out there. There's something that says that you are not a divine being. The Yetzer Hara says what? That you are not divine. That fundamentally you are in a body and that you will die someday. That all these things that you accumulate and all these things you do not make a stick difference about who you are. But that the only thing which makes a difference in who you are is your desire to adhere to what the truth is. It's your desire to be truly humble and attach yourself to that which is really true and that which is outside. But what is outside? If you explore the matter further, and if you learn and you understand, you'll begin to see that it is God which is outside. That there exists a force, there exists a power who is a true Shelit on the Bria. There exists a force and a power and a being who is true control of reality, who is reality itself. That is the ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is that we are not God. And it is essentially very painful for us to admit that, because we refuse to yield the pleasure of that type of value. We like this value, it makes us feel good, but it doesn't make us be good. If you want to be good, you have to obtain your value from real being. How do you obtain your value from real being? You obtain your value from real being when you are double to the emes, when you attend to cling, when you adhere to that which is true, when you cling to adhere to that which is outside of your body, when you cling to the Bonishim of self, the source of all truth. When you're involved in mitzvahs, you're involved in learning, you're involved in clinging to the truth. What happens when you cling to the truth? When you cling to the truth, it's a whole different situation. What exactly is a mitzvah? Let's look at a mitzvah. What is a mitzvah? The Buddhism says, I give you mitzvahs. Why does he give us mitzvahs? You know, there's a famous statement of Talmud, and Talmud says the following. Let's say you have a man and woman, you have a husband and wife. Now the husband has to put on tefillin every day, correct? Yes, it is a mitzvah in the Torah. Let's say his wife one day gets up and says, you know, I really feel full today, and I'm going to put on tefillin. I'm going to put on your tefillin right after you finish. I'm going to do it too. So her husband looks at her and says, well, you know, it's like a strange mood you're in. Fine, she puts on tefillin. The next day she puts on tefillin. The wife decides to put on tefillin from now on. I ask you, is there anything wrong with that? She was wondering, why is it an incredible thing? She's doing a mitzvah. Who gets the big reward? Who? Who is greater in that mitzvah, the man or the woman? Well, you could say the following. Wait. The man is putting on tefillin because he has to. He doesn't have a choice. But the woman doesn't have to put on tefillin, but she feels so close to the Hashem. She feels that she wants to adhere, to connect to spirituality so much that she wants to put on tefillin too. She obviously has a higher motive than the husband. Right? Wrong. I thought to read the food guys. I see you've been to too many shows, you can tell by the tone of my voice. I thought I could lead you astray by the nose, but I can't do that anymore. Let's see again. You answer me. Okay, we'll figure out another way. I have a very good old friend, brilliant and illusion. Yetzirah. Okay. 1 second. Why is the husband better than the wife in putting on tefillin? Even though the husband has to and the wife doesn't. Because that's the point. The husband has to put on tefillin. When God says to the husband, put on tefillin, the husband says, he says the thing, wait a minute, should I put on tefillin or not? So he's thinking, why should I put on tefillin? Because God says put on tefillin? Who is God? I'm also a power. I'm also something. Why should I put this to God? So in other words, when a person is commanded to do something, he right away becomes involved in a conflict between the ego and God. Who is more important? Who is more substantial? So who would I listen to? A mitzvah, which is a commandment, arouses and stimulates the conflict between man and God. But the Buddhism wants to do that. He wants to arouse that conflict because the Buddhism wants you to choose between the person and God. You see, but if the woman puts on tefillin, there's no arousal of any conflict. The woman simply goes ahead and does it on her own. The Buddhism says, well, that's very noteworthy. In fact, I have a big nachas from you. But that's not what I want. I want a conflict. It is a conflict which will make you into the person. It is the fact that you must choose between who God is and who is not. That's what's going to build real being. That's the essence of mitzvah. The essence of mitzvah is to arouse and stimulate that conflict. Why? Because what the Buddhism wants to stimulate is value, true value or false value. The Buddhism wants you to go through the motions of thinking the following way. Shall I listen to the Buddhism because he is the absolute truth and what he says is true? And shall I connect him? Shall I subjugate my will to his will? Shall I do that? One thing? Or shall I not? Shall I understand that I am a power too because I'm a person with pleasure, power, performance, and recognition? Wait. Right? So therefore, why do I have to listen to God? I can also do this by myself, right? You see. And not only that, we're doing all these things, I feel great. I feel like I'm a somebody. So therefore, you must choose between the illusion and between the reality. What happens if you deny the illusion and you go with the reality? Essentially, you're saying to yourself the following, and here is the entire matter. When I say to myself, no, I have a title, I have a desire, but it's wrong. I want to have power, but it's wrong. These things are false. And I say, Hashem Elokim Eino Milvadoi. There is no one but God. He is the essence, the beginning, and the end of all. And there is nothing else but Him. I want to find out what His will is. And by doing His will, by subjugating my ego, by subjugating this false self, I will attach myself to the truth and to what really is. The question is, what then happens to the person? Something incredible happens. What happens is you don't realize it because it's invisible. Suddenly a kedusha comes down from the Shemayim into your neshama. It is invisible. You cannot see that transfer. But suddenly what happens is when you do a mitzvah, the immediate consequence of a mitzvah is to draw down a light or spiritual power into your neshama. And what happens to your neshama as a result? It grows. It grows like a really nutrient. It's real growth. Suddenly the neshama becomes more powerful. Really powerful. And as the neshama becomes more powerful, you begin to feel more sensitive to kedusha, more sensitive to spirituality. And how do you feel about yourself? You begin to feel a certain inner dignity. It's a sense of fulfillment that doesn't come from what you own, or what you've done, or who you control, or who you're told where to go. It comes from what you are. It comes from what you've done. It comes from the fact that you've subjugated yourself to the true self, to the Hashem. That suddenly begins to instill into you a new feeling. But it's a feeling not of power, it's a feeling of dignity. It is a different type of feeling. It is not a feeling of arrogance. It is a feeling of humility. It is a feeling of true honor, of the honor that comes from the being of the self. That is the difference. Value comes in the mitzvah too. But where does it come? It comes by replenished being. It is the true statement of the formula. How do I know that? You all can see that. Whenever you do a mic play, when you get stuck, let's say you help somebody out, right? How do you feel about that?
Good.
You feel good, right? But why do you feel good? You feel good because you own a lot of things? Because now you're a big shot? No. What you really feel good is for the deed itself. You've done something right. You've done something important. You are now more important just by virtue of what you've done. You see, not because someone recognizes you, or because you've achieved a certain amount of pleasure, or power, or whatever have you. You really feel good. You know why you really feel good? You feel good even though it's not connected to an external situation. Why you really feel good? You really feel good because you've drawn down a new kedusha into your neshama. And that new kedusha neshama, which is now replenished, or reinforced your being, gives you a sense of value that emanates from the true being that you've achieved. That is the choice. The choice is real being or non-being. Either way you will have a sense of value. The Eighth Torah says, wait. You want value? You want value to feel what you are? You want to remove that void, that emptiness? I'll tell you how to remove that void. I'll tell you how to remove that emptiness and acquire again what you once were. Concentrate on the truth. Cling to the Hashem. Subjugate that arrogance and that self to the will of the Hashem himself, and realize that by doing that, you will be bringing down a true kedusha, and thus enhance you, hence a real value. So in other words, what a mitzvah does, if it's done correctly, is really bring down being, and that being will manifest itself in a real sense of fulfillment. But that sense of fulfillment will not be an illusion. It will be real, because it will be based on that which you've really done. Or the other option. The ego says, nah, forget about it. You want value? Come. I got plenty of value. I'm selling value today cheap. It's on sale. But all the ego can sell is value. He can't sell real being. He can give you the self-fulfillment that comes from an illusion. But it's not real. Because on the day you die, there is no pleasure. There is no power. There is no performance, and there is no recognition. Death is the great equalizer. Suddenly, you all realize every man is the same. As far as Olam Hazeh is concerned. On the day that you die, and the day you're buried, and you're put in a coffin, and you're put into the shrouds, all people have the same shrouds. Whether you are tzaddik, or whether you're Russia, no matter who you are, every Jew is buried in the same tachrichim, or the same white garments. Why? Because all Jews are equal. In the end, death is the great equalizer. As far as Olam Hazeh is concerned, as far as our physical existence is concerned, you cannot achieve true power or true being. Because this is not your station. This is not where you're going to be. This is not your true reality. Death says you are all the same. There is no difference. You cannot take your car with you when you're dead. You cannot take your pleasures anymore. You cannot take the performance, the great achievements that you think you've done. And nobody recognizes you when you're dead. You're all forgotten. It's gone. Where is all that? Because these things can only give you a sense of fulfillment while you're alive. Because they are all of the body. Why is that? Because all they are is nothing more than a sense of value. There is no being. Hence when you die and the neshama goes up, it goes up with whatever being is achieved. But if all your life you were after these four false illusions of being, when you die you will have no being to take with you. Because all you have done is achieve value. Value without being is illusory. It is false. It is zero. It doesn't exist. It is unfortunate that you cannot see this now, because we're all in bodies, and we all have Yitzhara. So you can walk out and suddenly be keyed on by a tremendous temptation, and you'll think, wait a minute, why am I tempted? I feel needs, I feel a drive, I'm tempted. But I'm tempted really for the self-fulfillment that it'll give me. That's my real temptation over here. But that's a false thing. In summary, what are we saying? What we're saying in summary is the following: that the Buddha diminished the neshama. He diminished the neshama to make it small, so that it would have an intense need. An intense need for what? A drive for what? The neshama has a drive for being. That's why the Buddha did that. By diminishing the neshama, by saying the neshama now is enthralled with the drive to be. The question to be or not to be is literally the choice over here. It is to be. The neshama wants to be. It wants to be. But once that neshama is put into the person, and the person is now cognizant that I must be, the person does not know, well, how am I supposed to be? It's confused. The person is confused about how to achieve, how to fulfill that void inside. All the person knows that somehow he has to get out of himself and be something. But the person does not clearly know how he's to be somebody. Enter the Yetzirah and the Yetzirah. Both of these things will supply the options. The Yetzirah comes over and says, you want to be something? I'll make it to something really big. You see? Do this, do that, do this. Suddenly the person does that and he feels good. He says, wait a minute, I feel good. If I feel good, I must be good. That's what he's thinking. That's the illusion. The Yetzirah comes over and says, wait, these are illusions. Think, man, think. This stuff is not going to go with you. It's over with when you're dead. You can't be getting real spiritual being by stuff that's going to make you feel good while you're in the body. You must realize that true being lies in your attachment to truth, in your attachment to the version of himself, in your desire, your willingness to do his will, to connect yourself to Kedusha. That's where the being lies. So the person thinks, you're right. I'm going to start devoting my life to wisdom and to mitzvahs. And by doing that, suddenly a real Kedusha comes down. And then the person begins to feel really self-fulfilled. He feels self-fulfilled. He says, but at least I know that this self-fulfillment corresponds to real being. And then after 120 years, when the person goes out of the body, he looks at himself and he sees a real live neshama. He sees real shlemus, real being. The value which he acquired was real. That's the choice. The drive is the same, to be or not to be. The options are different. The Yetzirah and the Yetzirah, both supplying the real options. But what fools the person is that he knows that he has to be, but he's confused as to the method. The Yetzirah and the Yetzirah are nothing more than two alternative methods to supply a fundamental need which is true of the neshama itself. If you understand that with clarity, you will understand exactly what the issue is. Again, the Yetzirah and the Yetzirah are two alternative methods. They are derachim. They are techniques. Both of these methods address themselves to a certain drive which is produced into the person by virtue of something that was done to him before he was born. And that is the drive for existence itself. It is a drive for being. That drive has nothing to do with the Yetzirah and has nothing to do with the Yetzirah. That drive has to do with the conditioned state of the neshama now, that's in a diminished state. The Yetzirah and the Yetzirah simply take advantage of that state, and they attempt to provide to that person with the neshama in him a way to fill the void of that neshama. But the person is confused, so it depends. If he wants to follow his guf, if he wants to follow his body, if he wants to follow what makes his body and his feelings feel good, he will lose. But if he follows his seichel, if he follows his da'at, if he understands the situation and thinks more deeply, if he refuses simply to be led into a way of arrogance, but he attempts to look at the true nature of reality and what's there, he will not be misled. He will go after a true sense of fulfillment, a sense of fulfillment which corresponds to a real being. And then, and only then, will he have something in Olam Haba. He will have achieved a true value, a true being, a true shlemus by virtue of his own efforts. And that is the greatest form of Olam Haba. Any questions? Yeah, wait, your question before. That's the answer to your question. The question was asked, Adam Rishon. How did the Yetzirah convince Adam Rishon actually Chava or both, to do the chait? The answer is because he went over to Adam and Chava and said, if you eat from the Eitz Hadas, you will be able to create, right? So it looks like what? It looks like the fact that a person is able to create and be like God is something in the Eitz Hadas. The answer is that's not so. What the Eitz Hadas was simply doing was addressing a fundamental need in the person already. The fundamental need in the person is to create. But it's to create a sense of being. But the person is confused as to how to create it. Should he create a real sense of being, or should he really create a sense of being which leaves him as a total creator? What the Eitz Hadas did was he came over first to Adam and Chava and said, wait a minute, you will be a God, you will be an absolute creator yourself. You will have the power for true independence, you see. So what the Eitz Hadas attempts to do is not to convince a person that he has a creative drive or that he needs to create. It's to convince a person that he can be a creator like God is, and usurp a certain aspect of divine power. Does that answer your question? Yes. Next, you had excuse me, Harat, you had a question, right?
Well, the only thing you indirectly answered it, it's that the Yetzer Hara sometimes works differently and says, listen, you're nobody, you're stuck, not worth it, don't do anything, and if you was in a state of depression, so that
yes, you can call it.
Some other way around.
But that's an arrogance. Of course. A depressed person who's just in the corner of a very arrogant person, because he's the center of the universe, and because he's the center of the universe, he thinks to a depressed person or a person of low self-esteem, he is preoccupied constantly with the fact that my importance. He is the center of the universe, so he's constantly preoccupied with the notion of his own self-importance. And the fact that he should be so important, and that he really is so important, he's extremely depressed, because somehow there's something in him which does not allow him to live up to that. But the fact that he's consumed with the issue of his own self-importance, whether it's through depression or whether it's through holiness, is still an involvement with himself as the central point of the universe. That is an aspect of arrogance, except it's the other side of arrogance.
Isn't it the neshama that wants to drive?
No, depression does not come from that source. No. Depression comes from the Yetzer Hara, but I won't go into how that comes from. It's a direct result of the Strachra from the other side. But both of them attempting to set the person to concentrate on himself, to be himself, and only for himself. Yes.
Honestly, I'm not passionate, but it seems that I have known people who have been very religious and observant, and it would appear that they would, moving towards against the code, when in fact they're
because what it is
not nice
very good.
people.
Okay, the question is, people who do mitzvahs, people who are involved in their life and do mitzvahs, it would seem that these people in some way have followed the direction of the Yetzer Hara. But then we find many people who do mitzvahs who unfortunately are not good people. How is that possible? Because the answer is, Yetzer Hara does not give up his battle. He's a very shrewd guy, this one. Why? Because his ability to get you to believe in an illusion is not only by getting you to these four things, but he's also another way. He's able to also counteract the Yetzer Hara. How? Because if he can make you do a mitzvah without knowing what you're doing, simply as a habit, he's already won. The Yetzer Hara not only works on these things, on the body, but the Yetzer Hara actually goes into the provinces of the neshama and says, wait a minute, you do a mitzvah? Fine, you want to do a mitzvah? Do a mitzvah. Just don't think about it. Just do it like it's a habit. If you do it that way, you will not realize what you're doing. You will not grow from what you're doing in a real way. You see. Now, let me just clarify that. The truth of the matter is that whenever you perform a mitzvah, you will be growing. Even if you don't really think about it. That is true. Because that's what the Torah tells us. That any type of mitzvah you do, you will be growing. Unless you do the mitzvah to accomplish evil purposes. If you do a mitzvah for evil purposes, there is no growth. For example, if you steal somebody else's tefillin and then you put it on, is that a mitzvah? No. Why? Because it is an evil deed. It's done by stealing someone else's tefillin and putting it on. So that's like mocking God. There's no kedusha, there's no being that is established from that type of a thing. So what we see is that mitzvahs themselves can sometimes be used by the Yetzer Hara. If they are used by the Yetzer Hara, they will simply bring your downfall or illusory being. In other words, what I'm saying is the mere performance of a mitzvah itself is not necessarily a guarantee of whether or not it's going to do you any good. A lot has to do with how you do it, what your kavanah is, what your intention is, and so on and so forth. Do we understand? That's why even though we see people who do mitzvahs, it does not necessarily mean that they're really gaining something from those mitzvahs. It depends on their sincerity. It depends on how they understand the mitzvah. It depends on how they see this mitzvah in terms of their service to God. It also depends on that. The mere mechanical performance of a deed is not sufficient. Yes.
When you talk about mitzvahs, you're now bringing up two very sophisticated topics. First of all, you're bringing up about what we were talking about before, the fact when you do something good, let's say you give stuff and you give charity, that would be considered a pure mitzvah, a pure good deed. But if you really look at it in depth, what about a person gives and feels a power to it? It's not a recognition of God. It's a feeling, wow, I'm this kind of a person, I get this. I mean, it's not purely one thing or the other. And you said what your intention is, how sincere you are. Well, there are people who, you're showing a fine line, because there are a lot of people who would kill, let's say, I'm giving an example, would kill a terrorist or kill somebody who's an evil person. Killing in itself is evil. I mean, it's not a good thing. But killing with the right motivation would not necessarily be an immoral or a wrong act. I mean, now you're getting the sophisticated balancing act of what's right and what's
I'm
wrong.
not. You are.
No, I know.
In other words, no, it's not to discourage the question. No. All I want to do tonight.
But I know this is another topic.
Yes, it's another topic. All I want to do tonight is simply to describe black and white exactly the mechanism of the Yetzer and the Yetzer. That's all. There are many subtleties and there are many nuances, as you pointed out. Of course.
Even the pleasure principle. Pleasure principle
Yes.
is the essence of the Yetzer.
Also, in a different way. There is no question that there are boundaries where they both function, there are subtleties and so on and so forth. But that's really an exploration of a different share. My concern is simply to realize what the objective of the Yetzer is, number one, and number two, how he achieves that objective. By virtue of what? By understanding what the ultimate objective is for your entire being. I want to show you that the Yetzer and the Yetzer are not simply two different voices that you hear in your head, each one schlepping you in different directions and having really nothing to do with your future life. What I want to show you is precisely is what these two forces are and how these two forces are a direct reflection of what ultimately the Buddha wants to do with you. You see, they're not side objectives. They're not alternatives that have nothing to do with the main line. They are involved in the very scheme of creation itself. Since the scheme of creation is Yichud HaBorei, it's the perception, it's the closeness and the understanding of His unity and what He is, that has become the fundamental scheme, you see, the central line, the central thread of all creation itself. And the Buddha has gone ahead and essentially made all of creation, Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh, a reflection, you see, of the drive to that unity, of the drive to that perception. So He's done different things. He has diminished the neshama to make that drive all powerful. And then He's given two different paths in which a person can achieve that, you see. So one path is forced and one path is not. But both of these paths always revolve on the question of unity. Ultimately, it's like the Nochash said to Chava. How did the Nochash seduce Chava to eat from the Ekadas of Allah? Ultimately, he said, well, Yisrael Kim, I will tell you the ultimate Yetzer. You will be like God. That's what it is. In the truth, you will not be really like God. We know that even when you do these things, you don't think for 1 minute that you created the universe. We're not talking about psychosis here. But what we are talking about is the fact that you would even think that you are a mini-God. It's true. I cannot make a star. I cannot make a galaxy. My power doesn't extend to that yet. But I can do this. I can do that. So I'm a little God. So I'm a mini-God and He's a maxi-God. You see. What's wrong with that? The answer is there's no such thing as a mini-God and a maxi-God. There is God, and there is that which has no possibility or any connection to divinity. There is a divine and there is a non-divine. That is the only kind of relationship which can exist in our world. There is no such thing as a little God and a big God. Such a thing does not exist. And that is exactly what the choice that you have. You have a choice. You have the ability to inflame and to completely what? And completely deceive yourself in terms of what you really are. And God has created the ability for you to deceive yourself. And the amazing thing, and this is what's incredible, the essence of the power of that deception is God. That's the amazing thing. You think, and this is something you must realize, when you're about to do that taiva, when you're about to do that chet, when you're about to do it, you will think, and I want you to, if there's nothing you remember from this year, absolutely nothing, I want you to remember this one point, that the next time you're about to do a chet, the next time you're about to do something which is a no-no, and next time you're supposed to have what? Some sense of self-fulfillment, and some sense of pleasure, whatever have you, I want you to look at that pleasure and understand that pleasure is Kedusha itself. God has that separated himself from that pleasure. It is God. But it's separated from him in the sense that you are no longer aware that it comes from him. In other words, in order to defy God, you must use God. That's the formula. The essence of the defiance, the essence of the rebellion is God himself. It is impossible to go against his will. It is impossible to go against his power. It is his power which gives you the ability to do his will or not to do his will, or to go against his will. He is the power behind both. And the day that you really understand that is the day you begin to see behind the illusion of a chet. It's the day you begin to see behind the illusion of pleasure, power, performance, and recognition that it is God, but it's the form where he was born.
Can you speak up, please?
Speak up.
In terms of what you're saying tonight, how do you understand what Brother Melch meant when he said Elohim Hashem?
When he said what?
Elohim Hashem,
That's what, there's a number of statements. The statement you say was, Kodem Tmusim, Olamati Bnei Elohim Hashem, Ochen Kodem Tmusim. That statement said an interesting thing. Well, it's a side point, but just quickly, that topic was said by Matan Torah. And what the Chazal learned after that topic is the following: is that when the Jews got to Matan Torah, when they got to the revelation of Sinai, right, the first time around, they had reached the Madrega of Adam Rishon before the Chet. And that Madrega they called Ish Elokim, like Moshe. What was Moshe called? Moshe was called Ish Elokim, the man of God. Because when you reach a high state of almost total spirituality, you're called as the man of God. But it doesn't mean that they're called Elohim. It means they have the power of God in them now, because they are now so close to him. It's a statement of proximity, it's a statement of level. Like Moshe says here, Moshe Ish Elokim. You ever see that statement?
Yes.
Moshe Ish Elokim. Why is he called Ish Elokim, the man of God? He's the first who's that. A dayan, a judge of a court, is called Elokim. Do you know that? Do you know that? A dayan. The Torah calls dayanim, shoftim, judges. The Torah doesn't call them dayanim, it calls them Elokim. The word Elokim refers to anyone who in some way has a quality of God himself. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be God.
The angel that wrestled.
But wait a minute, even the Nachash, when the Nachash spoke to Chava, the Nachash didn't say, V'hayuso Elokim, you will be God. It says, V'hayuso Ki Elokim, you will be like God. It's not possible for you to be God. Only psychotics believe that they can be God. A normal thinking person doesn't think that he's going to be God and create the world. That's impossible. But it's possible to usurp certain qualities that the Bereshit has and think for a moment that you have certain features which can make you like God. Okay, I think at this point we should have a pretty clear idea of what the inner mechanisms are of the Yetzer Hara, of the Yetzer Tov, and where these things have started from. Next week we will go into a very important topic called Zichur Haguf, and it's one of the most important topics in all of Hashkafa. There is Zichur Haguf. I will tell you this next week. There are very few people. It is one of the most important concepts in all of Judaism, yet 99% of all Jews have never heard of it.
You have to tell to mention the door.
To our umbrella. What?
This is the drawer for the next class, and there's always a point of...
Stay tuned.
What does it mean in translation?
What?
What does it mean in simple translation?
Zichaguf,
Yeah,
purification of the body.
a purification of the body. Purification of the body.
Purification of the body.
Count me among one of
For
the...
those who have led next week, we have finished basically the concept of each of this point of the Yetzer and the Yetzer of Shleimus and Chazon. You must remember these terms, you see. And so, okay,
What
now,
tape should we listen to?
Series 2, tape 5. Excuse me. Now, one thing. For those people, for those people who are interested, how many people are interested in getting a tape from that Yurzeit Shir?